Hey, it's Kley. Welcome to another video. Today, we're going to take this old SX Furrian Telecaster style guitar that has been unassembled and sitting basically in catching dust in my basement for many years now, and we're going to bring it back to life and give it to somebody that needs an awesome new electric. So, if you want to stick around and watch that process, stay tuned.
Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about putting this guy back together. We're starting with the neck joint. Now the first thing I want to do is use these toothpicks and breaking them off and just putting a little bit of toothpick inside this neck screw holes because they're a little bit kind of loose and chewed up with the multiple times this neck's been on and off. So it just kind of gives these screws a little bit of something to bite into and to push into. And then as I'm tightening the screws, I recommend that you kind of do it. You don't necessarily want to take one screw and do it completely tight. You want to kind of put them back in slowly but surely, so you can see I'm kind of going back and forth from each one to each one, advancing them all a bit by bit, and just making sure that the neck, so you can see I'm reseating the neck and making sure it's correctly in the pocket, because the pocket does have a little bit of slop to it. All right, I need a little bit of a beefier screwdriver to make sure I could drive these screws home correctly, just to get myself a little bit more torque, and having the right tool for the job is pretty important so you don't kind of strip out these screws. And you can see just slowly advancing and checking that the neck is seated correctly. Everything looks really good. Now I'm looking at the bridge here. Now I wanted to use this bridge. You can see I'm actually tapping some holes. But actually, as things turn out, you can actually look where the hole where the Tele pickup would go in, there actually isn't enough space. And it's a little unfortunate just because I didn't realize it until it was probably too late. But here I am. This is actually, I went back through my parts stash and found the original chrome bridge. And this one will fit just fine as it was originally intended for this. So I'm installing a bridge pickup. I currently have a Cavalier Lion. I'll try to check the link in the description down below. But these Cavalier pickups actually have been pretty nice. It's a little more of a vintage-inspired 60s-ish, 50s, 60s era Telecaster style pickup. Which I actually think sounds really nice in this guitar. So I'm really excited about that. And we've got these 3 mounting screws here at the base, which actually do a nice job of holding this bridge down nice and tightly. I did the same thing where I put just a tiny little bit of toothpick in the holes first, just to really make sure that these screws have something to bite into, because again, older guitar, older wood, not always so confident. So now I've got my multimeter out and I'm just checking the leads from these pickups to see if they've got some DC resistance. And this is what I was going to use for the neck pickup. You can see it says OL, so it's actually not reading anything, which is indicative that that pickup is dead. So this is just a nice way to double, triple check to make sure that the pickup that you've got is going to work correctly. And I checked the bridge pickup. It was reading at about 7 to 8K, which was a really nice range. And I think that's going to work really nicely. So now you can see I've got this is actually the original neck pickup out, and it was reading at 7.8K, which is a little hot, but it is going to work. Now you can see the pick guard actually is pretty knackered. Now I'm feeding these wires through, which it works just fine, but the pick guard actually has shrunk, so it doesn't fit super great, but it's the only Tele pick guard I've got. Also, I did some really janky Dremel routing on the pocket to actually fit a Stratocaster style pickup. So I actually have to improvise a little bit and find some screws that I can actually fit through this Tele neck pickup and actually will screw them into the body directly. And you can see I found a screw that can go in, but I was a little bit concerned about where I need to screw it into the body directly, which actually I think is kind of a nice mod, but I needed to enlarge the holder. So I used my drill. You can see now I'm committing pretty hard to this, but I think this is the right way to go for this guitar. But these pickups are going to be directly mounted to the body, so I needed to get some spacers here to space with those screws underneath the pickup to push it up against the body. You know, again, typically you would mount these to the pick guard, but I'm doing it a little bit different. All right, so I got everything mounted on correctly. You can see watching a little of that pedal show episode. Shout out to Mick and Dan, love you guys. But now I've got the original pick guard. You can see I'm having a tough time. It's kind of warped and a little bit shrunken, just because this is probably a 10 or 15-year-old piece of plastic. But once I kind of got the screws in the right kind of order, everything actually worked out just fine. I kind of had to stretch and bend a little bit, but it's going to work no problem. And, you know, actually I kind of like using the original. I think the black on Sunburst looks really kind of neat. You can see a little bit on the body where it looks kind of cloudy. That's because I had begun sanding it because I was going to refinish it, but then I was also maybe kind of trying to do some experimenting with some DIY relicking, and I may readdress that at some point. But for now, my goal is to get the guitar back up and running, get it in our this guy's hands, my friend, and just to get this thing playing again. And if we do choose to paint it this summer, we absolutely can do that. But just wanted to get it up and running first. So getting the pickguard up, we're really getting nice and close now. We're getting this thing up and running. My next task is to make the control plate. Now, I don't have one, and I don't really want to buy one. So I've got this piece of sheet aluminum, and I'm just going to manufacture one myself. I sized it and I wrote a pencil line, and I bring it over to my table saw, and I just cut it right on my table saw. I like working with aluminum because it's a lot easier to manufacture and drill holes in and cut. And then I'm using my angle grinder here to kind of deburr those sharp edges and just kind of roll and round over everything kind of roughly. So it's a little easier to work with. It's not going to knacker up my hands or anything like that. You know, now we're just going to make sure, I'm going to try to cut a little bit of a roundabout contour here. So I'm just taking my pencil out and trying to give myself a little bit of a general idea here on how it'll work out. So as I get all these pencil lines on, bring it back over to the grinding wheel here, and I was thinking about using the grinding wheel to actually notch everything out. And that worked okay, but it definitely produced a ton of dust, so I kind of wanted to go to another plan. So I changed my strategy a little bit, and now I'm using my Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel. This actually gets through the aluminum a little bit more efficiently, so I don't have to grind away this whole chunk that's coming off. And actually, I don't even necessarily need to grind it all down. Just need to get it at a pretty point where I can bend it off. And this actually was a little bit more efficient use of my resources to get through things pretty nicely. And this actually worked pretty good. So this is just, actually, you can see my wheel is disintegrating a little bit. So I did need to put a fresh wheel on. And I think just the general thought here is continuing to go rough with something that's rough, and then medium with something that's medium, and then smooth with something that's smooth. So in this situation, the rough is using the Dremel, the medium is using this grinding wheel, and then I don't know if I got footage, but using sandpaper would be the fine. So you just kind of go rough to medium to fine, and that helps you to get the right shape and then get it to a usable state in the end. So now here we are getting this guy fitted in. See, I'm looking for the spot here to drill the hole for the mounting screw. And just going to drill that guy right in there. A lot of hand drilling, which is not maybe the best for precision, but I just, you know, the point of this build really isn't to make the highest quality guitar ever imaginable, but also a little deburring there. I just use a larger drill bit on the back side to get rid of those little burr edges. But again, the point of this build isn't necessarily to make the best or fanciest guitar in the world, but maybe to inspire a little bit of what is possible with a little bit of ingenuity and kind of a can-do mentality. And again, we're taking something that really was garbage or trash and useless in some way and just trying to make it something that's maybe even just a little bit better. So finding some screws that will fit in here. Now, again, using my toothpick method just to make sure that those screws have a little something more to bite into. That's partly because the drill bit that I used there was just maybe a little bit bigger than I maybe would have wanted in hindsight. I need to get some new drill bits that are a little smaller, but actually it's going to work completely fine. And while this isn't the prettiest control plate you'll ever see in the world, and it maybe clashes a little bit with the aesthetic, it's too big, it doesn't have the nice curved edges, but I actually kind of dig it. It's a little bit unorthodox, and it matches kind of the vibe of the guitar. So then I use my tape or my speed square there with measurement to try to find the center line of this piece of aluminum, and then drill a couple holes around the center line just to try to give it a little bit more of a precise fitting. Then we take this guy off and we drill the holes out even bigger, and we should be good to go. Now you can see I've got a couple potentiometers. I'm going to test them by putting both, I'm measuring for resistance. I put one lead on the middle, which is the wiper and then one lead on the outer, and I sweep the pot, and it should go from 0 up to the full value of the pot just to make sure that that pot is working. Because again, I'm pulling from my part stash, so it's important that I verify that these old parts are working. It's very definitely possible that I could have a pot in there that is not working correctly. So want to make sure I get something in there that is working correctly. Now, just drilling the holes out even a little bit bigger yet. Again, you want to make sure you drill the hole nice and big and deburr. Now that I got my holes drilled, I want to use some nice washers and then just get some nice tension here, screwing these nuts on those on the bolts of the pot. And so this guy's ready to move forward. Now I'm looking at the jack plate. I don't have one again, so I actually grabbed a really large fender washer, and this is going to work completely fine. It doesn't have the right angle to fit the curve correctly, but I just kind of bent it into place a little bit, and actually screwing the holes in worked fine. Now I decided to off-center these holes from the existing ones because I wanted to, they didn't quite match up correctly in terms of how far apart they were, and I really wasn't super concerned about that, but just wanted to get something in here that was super functional, and that's exactly what this is. Again, not the prettiest solution in the world or the technically most correct, but again, the spirit of this build is to use exactly what I've got on hand, little odds and ends, nicks and knacks, to get a functional electric guitar. And you know, I think that we're going to be a little bit, I'm hoping that we might exceed some expectations here with exactly how well we can make this thing work out. So we're just getting that jack plate screwed in. That's actually going to work completely fine. So now we're just ready to solder these wires together. Now I'm testing out a jazz bass style wiring, which means actually that the, I believe the hot signal, you know, just kind of removing some sheathing here, but the hot signal actually comes into the middle lug, which is odd and not normal for using a typical volume control as a voltage divider. So it actually is more of a mixer style circuit, right? So the hot signal goes into the middle, and it can either send to ground on the bottom lug, or the top lug is the output, and then the outputs actually run to both pots. So the outputs of each pot is tied together, so they actually run in parallel with one another. Now, I had to remove some little old wires, because again, I'm just using old 250K pots. Now, one thing I'm kind of curious about with this jazz bass wiring is to see if it kind of loads the pickups in a way that is a little bit atypical or abnormal. You know, for example, when you typically roll the volume down on your guitar, it might get a little bit darker. But I'm just curious to see if with this jazz bass wiring, because you do basically have the, you know, the input comes to the wiper, exits out of the top lug, and then it goes to the other side, where, you know, depending on how you have that one set, it might load a little bit, but I guess we'll find out. I'm using a ground wire here to connect the grounds of these two pots, and then I'm going to have one final ground going to the back of the pot. One note I will say about, I never really like soldering onto the back of pots, and I think that's because I don't always have a soldering iron that's capable of getting hot enough to really adequately heat up the back of a potentiometer, especially as it's connected. So one thing that I think I should do, and that helped me, is to actually take the pot off of the aluminum plate, because the aluminum plate that it's connected to acts as a bit of a heat sink. So that might be a little something you can do to help if you guys are struggling with that as well. I'm going to grab a little spool of wire here to just hold as kind of a third hand, and got my ground wire going in there. So all of my grounds should be pretty much good to go. I do have one you can see coming out of the control cavity going into the bridge pickup. There's a stray black wire coming out of there as well. That is the ground wire that actually grounds. So there's a little wire that goes with the yellow and black one, and that actually is just, the other side is stripped, and it's sitting underneath the chrome control plate, like the bridge plate, and that helps to ground the strings, ground your hands, and ground your body when you're actually playing the guitar. So now you can see I'm just soldering in these red wires, connecting the two hots in parallel to send the output of each of those volume controls to one another, and then finally out through this red wire, which I'm soldering in now, and that's going to go over to the volume control, or to the output jack, I mean. So yeah, a nice little setup. I'm really curious to see how this is going to go. I think it's interesting. One thing I'm a little uncertain about is if it's going to be a nuisance, because let's say you just want to switch from the neck pickup to the bridge pickup. You actually have to turn off the one you're on and turn on the one that you're off, that you want to. It's basically two actions, whereas if you've just got a switch, you can kind of flick it from front to back. So I wonder if I might miss that. But what is intriguing is the ability to kind of mix and match a little bit more. So for example, in the middle position of a Tele now, you get 100% of the neck, 100% of the bridge. But I could actually do like 80% of the neck, 60% of the bridge if I want. It kind of gets some atypical mixing going on. But overall, with all that work, the wiring is done on the guitar. So really excited about that. Really eager to get this thing ready to rumble. So we get these screws back on and we move forward. Now, just got some strings on. Going to tighten up these strings, and this is a fresh new set of strings. You can see this guitar came with two. There's a little black hole there. It originally came with two string trees, but I just have the one for better tension and break angle. And now we're just doing a little bit of setup. The guitar was a little rough to set up. First of all, it has a really flat neck angle, so I had to kind of take that in. I used my 12-inch radius gauge to help me put across the strings and figure out to match the radius of the strings to the radius of the neck, because it does have a gentle rolling curve. But now I'm just addressing these saddles, and I didn't use any shims under the neck, so basically, and then also the nut was set correctly from the last time I had installed it. It actually is a Graphtec nut, so a lot of the adjustment needed to be made on the saddles to get them to dial in correctly. And it actually, once I got the saddles in place, the setup on the guitar was basically done, and this thing is ready to play. Alright guys, here it is. This is the SX Furrian Telecaster style guitar that I've brought back to life. It's been several years now that this guy kind of got took apart and it's been sitting idle, but I had a friend recently that's had expressed some interest in electric guitar, and I thought this would be a perfect guitar just to put back together for him to bang around on and see if he enjoys it or not. My intention with this rebuild was to put literally $0 into it. So this body is from an SX Furrian Telecaster style guitar that I bought like 10 years ago. At the time I bought it for $100. It was the body and neck. The body is not in great condition. I kind of tried, I was going to repaint it, so I started sanding it down, but then I kind of gave up on that at some point. But it's in perfectly functional position. It's got the original tuners, original neck, original body, original pick guard, original bridge. I think these even are probably the bridge saddles, but everything else is kind of cobbled together. So, I've got, I think this is a Cavalier Telecaster style bridge pickup that I had in my parts drawer. I think this might be the original neck pickup. I actually mounted it to the body. There are a lot of imperfections with this guitar. The neck pickup actually is a little slanted up. I didn't mount it perfectly. The neck actually sits pretty fine, but the high E is maybe a touch close to the edge, but it's okay, it's fine. I didn't have a control plate or a jack plate, so I actually fabricated this out of just aluminum, and this is just a big washer. I have two volume controls. This is wired up as like a jazz bass. So this black is the neck volume, this white is the bridge volume, and that's it. So when both are up like this, it's like as if the pickup position was in the middle. And if I just want the neck, I turn the bridge off. If I just want the bridge, I turn the neck off. So I didn't have a three-way switch on hand, and I didn't want to cut a channel in my aluminum. So this was a little simpler way to do it, and I want to see how it works. So I'm kind of excited about this, actually. This is really the first time I've fired it up, so let's go ahead and see how it sounds. Well, thanks for checking this out, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. I think this is a really, really fun rebuild. It's a really fun little guitar to play around on. There are definitely some things that I'm considering doing. Might take these parts apart, repaint the body, maybe get a new pick guard. I actually really kind of dig how this aluminum control panel played out. I actually really also dig how the jazz bass dual volume is playing. I also think the neck pickup is really, really dark sounding. It doesn't have a lot of brightness or sparkle, which is something I might look to improve upon. But other than that, it plays really well. The neck actually plays really nicely. This is going to be a fun little guitar to pass on. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down below on what you would do to this. I'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.